I want about, hopefully, if I don't get a little long-winded, 30 minutes of your time.
Yes, sir.
Just to be really real, though. I want to start off just by reading a few statistics that actually pertain to people and individuals who come from backgrounds like a lot of you come from.
Yep.
According to a national survey, 25% of foster youth reported that they had been homeless at least one night within 4 years after exiting foster care. 54% of former foster youth completed high school. In California, that number was only 43%. Parents with a history of foster care are almost twice as likely as parents with no such history to see their own children placed in foster care or become homeless. 56% of youth leaving foster care reported using hard drugs. Over 70% of all California state penitentiary inmates have spent time in the foster care system. What do you think of that?
That's tough.
That's on the
Hard.
Yeah. Throw that garbage in the fire.
I can throw it in the fire.
No, it's all good. I asked him, just throw it in the fire.
You did it horribly.
That's all he needed to do. Because that is not what I see in front of me. I do not see future inmates. I do not see future homeless youth. Nah, if you guys knew what I see, if you guys saw it in yourselves what I see in you, I guarantee you, you would think the sky is the limit for your life. And I'm not coming up here as someone who hasn't lived through a similar situation, because number one, the only one who has your story is yourself. That's it. People may share similar experiences, but at the end of the day, you're the only one with your story, no matter what that story is. Myself, I would like to share a little bit of my story, and I'll tell you what, it took me 22 years to stand up in front of people and with the ability to get it out. I was born two months premature, addicted to heroin, cocaine, methadone, you name it, some of you the same. I died at some point during that first week, but it wasn't my time yet. My mother was an addict, my father was an addict and in prison. And as soon as she took me home a month after my birth, the state of Massachusetts took me away like that. And a family, and you're going to hear these names thrown around a little bit, Lisa and Paul, they're my guardians. They factored a lot in my upbringing. They helped raise me. Sometimes it takes a village, right? That's a reality. Sometimes it's not only our parents who raise us, sometimes it's not our parents at all. Sometimes it literally takes 4, 5, 6 people to raise you. When people ask me how many parents I have, I say 5. So the state took me away. Lisa and Paul, who were going to be my foster parents and in the future my guardians, they checked on my mother because my nana was trying to get in touch with her through a local church. And they got into the home, and it was a drug home. Some of you have seen and know what I mean. People in and out, dishes, dirty dishes in the sink, not much upkeep going on. And at first she judged her, and she said, and then she backed up and she said if it wasn't for God's grace, she wouldn't be where she was today. So she said, Cindy D. Simone, that was my mother's name, come stay with me for the weekend. She always says she came for the weekend but stayed 4 months. And in that 4 months, they had got me back from the courts. And after 4 months, my dad got out of prison, and my mother and him linked up, and she left with me. And within a week, she was back on Lisa and Paul's doorstep saying, can you take care of my son? Because I can't do it right now. And from the outside looking in, if you don't understand that situation, you view that act as anything but love. You're like, how could you give up your child But let me tell you something, that was one of the most selfless acts anyone could actually follow through in. Because it came from an understanding of where she was at that time in her life, that she wasn't in a position to care for her child adequately. And don't you ever downplay the influence that your environment has on you. My mother and father were not a good combination at all. You would do things around some of your boys and some of your girls that you wouldn't do around other people. Just because when you get with a certain group of people or with a certain person, your mentality changes and the way you act changes. People say it all the time. If you go to the courts, if there was a group of people that committed a crime, sometimes the sentence will be less because of the influence the group holds over how people operate and how they conduct themselves. So don't downplay your environment because it has a tremendous pull on how you operate. Don't say, nah, I can hang out with the boys and do this and that and nothing's going to affect me. Try it. Some of you have been in situations where you wouldn't have been in if maybe you would have said, nah, I'm not coming out tonight. And their family for the first 2.5 years of my life. My mother took that time to clean up, to get an apartment. She left my father. She gave birth to my sister. We went and lived with her outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we were a family. Single mother, but we were a family. My dad was still doing his thing. He was still running the streets. That's fine. That's fine. Something we also have to realize is a lot of us were birthed into the wounds of our parents. We look at them, you're like, why weren't you there? Why couldn't you do this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they had wounds of their own. And they didn't take the time to develop themselves, and they didn't take the time to heal their own wounds. And when that happens, when you're birthed into an environment where there are wounds unhealed, you feel the effects of that. Sometimes it comes out in verbal or physical abuse. Sometimes it comes out in neglect. It manifests itself in a lot of ways. And you don't understand as a child. You're like, you're supposed to be my parent. Why do you do this to me? Why don't you love me? Wounds that your parents haven't healed. Sometimes you're just not at the place where they can raise a child. And that's just, to be all the way real, that's just reality. Right? So, because my mother and father were IV users, they contracted AIDS. And I don't know if any of you have any family members or parents with AIDS. Back when you contracted AIDS in the late 80s, early 90s, they called it the monster because you were dead within a year or two. Nowadays, you can live a pretty normal life if you have HIV or AIDS. But over time, that disease began to manifest itself on the outside, and my mother became sick. And it's a very isolating, painful disease because you are tagged with negative stigma after negative stigma. There were stories. We lived in an apartment complex. My mom came back from the pool one day crying. I think I was probably somewhere between 12 or 14. She came back and she's like, Nicholas, you got to do something. I was up at the pool and the manager told me I couldn't be in the pool. Because if you don't understand something, sometimes you have a fear of what you don't understand. And I was scared. I was like, what am I supposed to say? I'm 12. Like, what do you want me to say to that adult? And a lot of you had to carry burdens and had to lift loads that you shouldn't have had to carry at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. Some of you are doing it right now. You're not meant to be a man or a grown woman before you're developed enough to understand what that really means. Because before you can be a man or a woman, you have to have someone show you how to be that. And some of you had to try to be that without anyone showing you how to. And that's tough. That's hard. No one's saying it's not. So my mother's disease got worse. And she relapsed after 7 years of being clean. And a lot of us have knowledge about things we shouldn't have knowledge about. So I was aware of what she was doing with a needle and a spoonful of liquid at 8 years old. And she actually was very honest to me about it. She confided in me, actually. She was lonely, she was depressed, but she loved me and she wanted the best for my sister and I. And she showed that by being honest. But that was also hard because I felt like I had to be the man of the house, like a lot of you felt like you've had to be before you were really ready. And really, you're just scared. You're just scared. But you don't have time to be scared. So what you do is you take that fear, you go, you take that sadness, you take that pain, and you go. Some of you girls do it too, but I'm mainly with this one talking to the men. And then you bury it, and you bury it, and you bury it. And then you wonder why you lash out at people. You wonder why you're angry or sometimes depressed. It's because you never process the emotions that you have been feeling. You hold all that in, it is going to do some messed up things on the inside of you. And when it's ready to come out, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do about it. And sometimes it comes out lashing out at a friend, a loved one, someone else. It comes out in a fist. It comes out with a you ain't shit. And I'll let you in on something. If anyone ever talks down to you or belittles you, understand that they are speaking from a place of unhappiness. Because when you speak from a place of happiness, you don't put that other stuff on other people. That's just to be all the way real. So my mother relapsed, and it wasn't long till the state was at our door again. And I remember coming home from school to 2 plastic bags, and we were on our way to Maine, because Lisa and Paul, my guardians, had moved to Maine since we lived with our mother. And then we stayed there for a year. And then the next year, we were back at home. And then the next year, we were back at Maine. And the next year, we're back at home. And some of you know about that bouncing around. And it's hard to find your stride without any stability, because your life is like this. It's just a whirlwind. And you don't understand what's going on. And there's a lot of emotions mixed up in that cyclone. Finally, it was the summer going into 6th grade. And it was about 2 weeks before school. You know, my mother brought us to TJ Maxx to put things on layaway. Sometimes you couldn't go home with the stuff you got. You had to put it on layaway. Shoot, you're on welfare. You can't always bring that home. So we put it on layaway. I joined Papa Warner football. Things were going well. I was ready to start middle school. And I was playing out front in the grass with my sister Kiana and our childhood friend Brittany. And we heard a voice, Nicholas and Kiana, follow me. I turn around. And I'm like, I see my social worker and I see 2 policemen. And I don't even know, without even thinking, I'm just like, we were playing around with a little cane. I'd actually hooked my sister and I was dragging her. I thought they were yelling at me for that. I just dropped the cane, and I just followed her, not knowing what was going on. And I watched the 2 policemen go into my home, and I knew what they were about to say to my mother. They were about to say, nah, your boy and your girl, they're not coming back. This is it, this is the last straw. So I remember getting in the back of that car, and I remember how sad I felt, like how much pain that accompanied that situation and that experience. And I did what I knew best. I did everything I could to not cry. I held it in. You know, you tighten your jaw a little bit, you breathe in a little bit. You can't even breathe. Sometimes it takes all your strength to not cry. You just hold it in. And we were brought to a foster home for a couple weeks, and then we finally went back with Lisa and Paul. And I tell you what, they are the biggest blessing I have had in my life, because I don't know personally where I'd be without them. And my mother finally said, you know what, this ping pong match has got to stop. You take care of them. I want them to have stability, I want them to have time to nurture. And that's just what happened. I found my stride. I was in Maine to junior high and high school. And in high school, I found my outlet, sports. Some of you like sports as your outlet. Some of you write, some of you do music, some of you dance. Some of you do other things, but it's important to have a productive outlet, because there are unproductive outlets. Alcohol, drugs, and yes, I'll say it, sex. That's an unproductive outlet. If you're running around having sex with her, him, and every which person, that's an unproductive outlet. You got to look into yourself and ask yourself, Why are you operating like that? And I'll be 100% real with you. I did that. And it was affirmation. It was attention. I like the attention. Keep it all the way real. So when it came down to applying for college, I had done what I needed to do through high school. Listen, sometimes you just need to do things you don't want to do. I didn't always want to do a project. I didn't always want to do my homework, but I did it. Because it just takes a little bit of foresight to know what putting in a little bit of effort does. And doing well in school, or at least just doing your best in school, are going to open up doors for you in the future. You can, listen, you can be successful without being an A or B student, as long as you were trying your best, as long as you were taking advantage of the opportunities and the resources that are available to you. But what's harder is when you don't put in your best effort now, and then you all of a sudden have a revelation later in life and you're like, man, I should have done it then. Then life would be easier. Yeah, you can still be successful, but you took the long way. But there's lessons in that too. So I remember applying for a scholarship, and it asked me about some personal hardships that I had overcome. And I spoke about my mother's sickness and things of that nature, and I submitted it through my guidance counselor. Before I went off to college, she gave me a card, and in that card it read, I had no idea you had the history you had. And simply because I was a happy kid, I operated in the reality of forgiveness. I operated in the reality of kindness. I just love people. And I see that in a lot of you. You guys love being around one another. Sometimes you got to move some stuff out of the way to open up. But we are social beings, and we are at our best when we are connecting with other people. Don't forget it. It's hard to do life alone. If you haven't reached the point yet, and you will, where you're able to open yourself up to other people, and you're not receptive to other people's kindness, and you're not receptive to other people's love, and that's understandable because a lot of your love has been misused. A lot of your love has been abused. A lot of people have violated your trust. So you guys are a little cautious, rightfully so. I understand that. But when you reach a point when you can accept that, that just opens up a whole new world. Because I'll tell you something. If people are speaking positive things, if they are speaking life into you, that's someone you want around you. At the end of that card, it said, you defy all statistics. I don't like to look at it that way. Like you, I faced my environment head on and I conquered it. I don't see statistics in front of me. That is not what I see in you guys. I see conquerors of your environment. As long as you don't give up. And not giving up is not always just checking out. That's not always giving up. Not giving up sometimes mean just doing what you have to do, taking that next step forward. And you have to take it in faith because you don't know what lies ahead. And a lot of you guys, a lot of your faith has been broken. A lot of you guys don't know what to have faith in. Just, if you keep moving forward, I guarantee you things will work out. I promise you. Because I lived through that and I just kept on moving forward, and I know people who just kept on moving forward, and I promise you, listen, it's hard to see. You guys are in circumstances where it's hard to see the greener pastures on the other side. It's difficult, it's hard, but I promise you, that if you don't give up, that if you move forward and you're positive and you open yourself up to people who are trying to speak positivity into you, life will work. That's life right there. So I went to college, but before I got there, I was called into the hospital because it said my mom wasn't going to make it through the night. And I'll tell you the truth, I was annoyed. I was at this youth leadership conference and I didn't want to leave. I was like, my sister said, Nick, we're coming to pick you up. I said, you know I'm coming back, right? The last thing I wanted to hear at that moment was that my mother wasn't going to make it through the night. Because to tell you the truth, I had probably heard it 4, 5, 6 times when I was young. Oh, she's in the hospital. Oh, she's not going to make it through the night. Yeah, I've heard that before. But when they got to Rhode Island, they picked me up, and we went to Boston to the hospital. I remember I walked through the door, and when I saw my mom, that's the first time her death became a reality. And she talked to me all the time. She says, you know what, Nicholas, I'm not always going to be here. And I didn't want to hear that. As a child, you don't want to hear that from your parents. You don't want to believe that. Your parents are supermen, superwomen. Nah, you ain't going to die. It's not going to happen. No matter how many times she told me. It's the last thing I wanted to internalize. It's the last thing I wanted to believe. But at that moment, I walked through that door. I saw my mother, and I froze. And everything that I had pushed down and bottled up for 18 years at that point just came out. Lisa and Paul were there, my brothers and sisters, their children were there, and I just went like this. I was alone in a room of like 8. I covered my face, and I just let it all go, and not voluntarily, man. I couldn't hold it back, and I tried. I tried my hardest. My sisters tried to console me, and I didn't want to. I didn't know how to be consoled. I wasn't used to this emotion. I wasn't used to these tears. But they came. And 3 years later, junior year of college, I received a similar call from my stepmom about my father. And when I got to Worcester, Massachusetts, I got to the hotel room. He was already gone. And he was in and out of my life for the most part, but for the last 4 years of his life, he had given up the streets, and he had actually been around. And I began to really see my father's heart. And he actually had a beautiful heart. And I wish that he didn't have that addiction covering it up. I wish I could have known more of my father. But such is my life. And I remember after my mother passed, I was on the phone with my dad, and the only thing he said was, don't cry in front of your sister. So a lot of you hold in your emotion, but a lot of it is reinforced by your environments. A lot of the men in your life don't cry. They don't know how to release emotion. So what is it for us men? You know, if you cry, you weep. Nah. I'll tell you what, like I said earlier, if you don't process the emotions as you're going through them, if you don't cry when you feel like crying, they are going to rip you apart from the inside. I was a binge drinker in college. So I get, you know, football, after the football games, I was getting turned up, right? And it was getting out of control. Not that I had to drink all the time, but when I did drink, I was pretty much brown or black out. And I would wake up the next morning and I would hear some effed up things I did. And listen, you guys, the glimpse you have of me, I'm just kind of like a happy guy. Like, I like to joke and I like to have fun. Like, that's just how I've always been. And when I heard the stuff I did, I was like, what? I was surprised. I didn't know I was capable of doing some of the things I did. And to be honest with you, I had an ex-girlfriend. I was blackout one night. I guess she had come up to me and she said, you're making a fool out of yourself. So I pushed her against the wall. That's not right. That's not okay. I don't remember doing it. That's not an excuse. But that just goes to show you, when you have things you haven't dealt with and you leave yourself open and vulnerable, drugs and alcohol will leave you open and vulnerable, and they will make you do things you wouldn't do if you didn't have that in your system. So don't think it's a game. Some people can go out and have a beer, others can't. Some people can go out and party and be okay, others can't. I struggled and wrestled with that. I had to come to a place like, okay, I can go out, I can drink a beer, but I can't go out with my buddies and get turned up, because good things don't happen when I do that. If I would have done that outside of college, which kind of cradles you and protects you, a lot of effed up things go on college campuses where a lot of people would end up in jail. I would be in jail. So after I left the hospital and I got back to college, I distracted my mind, I focused on pursuing a girl, and I really like girls, so that was cool. And things didn't work out. And I fell into a deep depression. And this is exactly for the reasons I'm sharing with you. All the stuff I harbored just came. And 4, 5, 6 months had gone by. And I was wondering why me, who's traditionally happy, is just walking around, just sad all the time. So I decided to do something. I decided to write down all my experiences from when I was born, based off stories. I don't remember when I was born. When I was born to that moment. And I cried through that whole writing process. I relived experiences I never wanted to relive. I felt things I never wanted to feel again. And by the time I was done, I felt liberated, I felt free, and I understood what got me through everything. And I'm gonna play on the cliche, it was love, and that was it. Because one thing I was open to other people's love. I didn't close myself off to that. Some people do, and it's hard when you do that for the reasons I explained. That was it. The love and the affirmation from people, not always my parents, that helped get me through. And I'm gonna tell you something. The UFC counselors, the counselors that belong to this camp, they love and care about you. And I don't mean, don't put love, don't make it like this mystical thing. It's not like, oh, a granola hippie, like, oh, I love you, I love the earth. Nah, man, operating in love simply means you treat others as a human being. Like, yo, you my dude, you're a human being. You cry, I cry. You feel, I feel. You're happy, I'm here happy. That's it. If you're going through a tough time, I understand. I'm not going to add on to that turmoil. That's it. The golden rule, do unto others. You've heard it 100 times before. Love doesn't have to be that crap. It's just operating in kindness, and understanding, and compassion, and sympathy. Because of a lot of you guys' upbringing, you have the capacity to understand realities of life that a lot of people, even here today, can't understand because they didn't live through those experiences. Listen, when you guys go to the top, and you will, I'm speaking that over your life, you, by society's standpoint, would have started here. Okay? That means you understand the reality down here. And you got to go through levels. Boom! You have an understanding of that reality. Boom! You have an understanding of that reality. And so on and so forth. So by the time you get to the top, you have seen everything life has. Listen, your experiences are going to make you strong if you're willing to take the good out of them. And I know it's hard to find the good sometimes, but if you're willing to put in the work, you guys will be indestructible. Because some things that will derail other people are going to seem like petty shit to you. And they're not going to derail you, they're not going to affect you, and you're going to actually wondering why this person's all flustered over that. But also understand where they come from and show a little compassion. You know, don't be like, you know, man up, sack up. So when I realized that you needed to operate in love and kindness and compassion, and I'm almost done, just bear with me for like 5 more minutes. After college, I decided I wanted to spread that across the country. So I came up with an initiative to walk from Maine to California and just help in any way possible. I recruited a best friend of mine, and what ended up happening is my friend and I took 7 months to walk from Maine to California, and in each state we volunteered at different nonprofit organizations, and they ran the complete gambit from animal shelters to homeless shelters to abused and neglected children to you name it. And one of the things I took out of that, people are people, and people are good. And if your vision, some of you just need to develop a vision. Because when you develop a vision, then your goals will be ordered according to that vision. Because our vision encompassed more than just ourselves, because it included other people, people rallied behind us. They were black, white, Mexican. It didn't matter what race it was. We were in a reservation in Arizona, poor. Like, have you ever been to a Native American reservation? I've never seen anything so poor in my life. These kids ran up to me in rags and handed us water. Like, people are not always out to get you. If you are positive, if you are operating for more than just yourself, if you are willing to help yourself, because that's where it starts with you making the decision to help yourself, then other people will help you. And they'll rally behind you. And if you fall, they'll be there to pick you up. And you, just like you guys pick up each other. So I completed that. And 10 months later, I moved to LA, and here I am speaking to you guys. Develop a vision. This camp, UFC, started with one guy's vision, and that was you.